Hi, welcome to Cliterally Speaking the Podcast. I'm Michelle Doherty.
And I'm Emily Lane.
We are BFFs dedicated to bringing you conversations between girlfriends over a bottle of wine.
Oh, I am so excited about the wine part.
Oh, me too. So pull up a chair, grab your glass,
And let's get talking.
Hey, Emily, how are you today?
Hey, Michelle, I'm so glad to be here. So glad to be here for so many reasons, you know.
Well, tell me about it then.
I mean, it's definitely been like one of those weeks, right?
It has, yeah.
There's a lot going on.
I mean, not just in everybody's world, but like in our own world. It's been one of those weeks.
It has. It must be some, like universal moment, right? It's full moon, whatever it is. Like the planets are aligned in such a way that it's just that kind of week. So I'm glad to have the reprieve.
Yeah.
But I'm also just thrilled because this is kind of an important moment for us.
This is an exciting episode. I can't believe it.
2 years.
2 years, our 2-year anniversary
Yeah.
episode, and the crowd goes wild. You can see just the hundreds of people in the studio audience, just clapping wildly for us here.
In their masks, socially distanced.
6 feet apart. It's actually, it's 3 or 4 football fields full of people. 2 years ago, 2018.
I know.
When we launched
so
it.
Cool,
Cliterally Speaking the Podcast.
Yeah. And it's beyond a show. It's like a movement. It's become things that people say, which is great. People are like, I've had an episode too.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And we are coming up on 100 episodes. I know we've got a lot of bonus content out there too. So we are already in our library have 101 things. 101 opportunities for our listeners
just
to,
in case you don't get enough of us,
listen to us. In case you have run out of everything on Netflix, there's still Cliterally Speaking the Podcast that you can listen to.
That's right.
I know.
Yeah.
And how the world has changed, but not really.
I mean,
2 years ago,
there's some phenomenal differences. This moment in time that we're experiencing right now is one that, in our generation, in our lifetime, and our children's and those before us, like, we will look back upon this time, not just our anniversary, but like this era, and we will remember it, like 9/11 and these huge pivotal moments. This is that time.
And it's like when we started out 2 years ago, there was, some, of course, there was the Kavanaugh hearings and things like that, we definitely went deep and meaty when we need to, and then of course we bring in the levity and the joy. But since March of this year, we've had to be. There's been more seriousness.
Yeah, it was.
We balance it, but
thinking about where we started and those conversations about the gray areas of consent and Kavanaugh, and as we've seen this current administration make certain decisions, we've been having those conversations, but it's definitely, it feels to me like this was a precursor for our moment in time where we're at. It's really perplexing right now.
Well, and I feel more responsibility because we do have this podcast. We do have listeners all over the world. I feel a greater responsibility to be. I mean, we're always honest, but not to be cavalier about what's happening in our world.
Yeah.
It's hard to be like, well, let's talk about like shampoos.
I agree with you.
Like a superficial kind of topic when there's so much people are going through. But I also want to balance it and with not being all doom and gloom and can you believe it, things like that. So
it's the organic conversation that we always try to employ, and it is. I appreciate what you said about we have this community here, and I too agree that we have this responsibility to be truthful about how we're feeling and thinking, because I think a lot of times people are afraid to have these conversations around those they care about because they know they don't always align with one another. And so rather than creating conflict, we just put on pleasantries. But we are in such an important moment of time that let's have wine and have the conversation.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, I think last week's episode brought that up, that there are some people who have the privilege of not having the conversations because things like that don't affect them so much, but and others have to have the conversations because their family members or they're personally affected by it. So I know you and I don't shy away from those conversations, and we want to continue to be that voice or that go-to or that safe haven for our listeners and our Cliterati all around the world, because we are all in this together. And if we don't acknowledge the struggles and the challenges before us, how alone are our listeners going to feel if they feel like they're the only ones that are out there doing that, or having to fight it? So, but yeah, like we've our name is so tongue in cheek, Cliterally Speaking, that some people think it's just it's a sex talk show, or it's all about, sex, really. And,
which we like to talk about that too.
Right. And we have fun talking about it. But it, as the clitoris has 8,000 nerves and is so
do our conversations, right?
Yeah. We don't want to be we don't want to define ourselves and our listeners by, the button that, we know that we are way beyond, what society thinks is a woman.
Well, think about one of the earlier lessons we learned with Dr. Vicki Lynn about the clitoris and how, it is way more expansive than the little button. It goes way deep within the body, which I think is a really great analogy for what we want to do with our conversations. Like, but there are all these little hot points, right? But really we want to address topics and conversations that really hit us deep within.
That bring, a little massage here, a little massage there. We can get to
a little pleasure here, a little pleasure there.
Right. Just to the point of pain. I'm pretty sure there's been some episodes where like, really? It's gone on an hour and 40 minutes, and that might be the painful point, past the no return. But it's exciting times. And before we go any further, let's talk about
our beverage. So since it's our anniversary birthday party, I thought bubbles are in order. Right? And so I went for something that is domestic, something out of Napa, especially, considering Napa is suffering right now. I want to give a little love out there. So Schramsberg is this wonderful Methode de Champenois house out there that I love. And, maybe someday our podcast can be a part of their library club, because that would be amazing.
Well, put it out there. Universe.
Yeah, so they have a delightful tasting experience. You go into their caves that are candle lit. They still hand riddle all their champagne. It's not champagne, it's Methode de Champenois. But they literally learned that technique from, I believe, the Veuve Clicquot.
Wow.
It's they really are doing an old French style technique. And the end product is very it's very true to champagne style. So it is one of my favorite bubbles. This is a $30 bottle. It is
because it's our birthday.
It's our birthday, so we can splurge. And, in this $30 bottle, you got tiny little sweet bubbles. Sweet, not sweet tasting, just they're darling, and it's 93. This particular bottle says it's a 93 pointer, so it does pretty well for $30, I would say. This is the Brut. You can get the Mirabelle, I believe, in a Brut Rosé also. This is just the Blanc. I always love this. It's despite the kind of sweeter aromatics on the nose, because you get that kind of toasty, some of that yeasty breadiness on the
Mm-hmm.
nose. That doesn't come through on the
Yeah,
palate.
not at
It's
all.
much drier. You get some of that like lime, kind of citrus notes on it that really make it seem fresh and bright. But it smells voluminous on your nose. And it tickles your tongue with all those little
It
bubbles.
does. It does. It dance on your tongue.
It does. It's wonderful. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I think it's delightful. I've already drank half the glass before me. Before we started,
I know.
recording, we were like, "Sam, press record." Before Michelle's finished it all, I think it's lovely, and you're absolutely right in everything that you've described it. Bear with me, Emily.
Okay. What are we wearing today?
It's it's a pair. It's in honor of our anniversary episode, our party. It is a bra and panty set that sparkles. Like, it could be sparklers, like 4th of July sparklers,
God,
but they're
I
not
love that.
really sparklers, but it's like,
Can it sparkle? Like, can it actually sparkle and sizzle? I love that idea.
It can if you want to. But yeah, that's, just sort of like, it doesn't need anything else. You don't need to wear anything else when you have that on with your sparkling, sparkling,
Yeah.
pair of underwear and bra matching
Love it.
set.
I think that's fabulous. I can just see like these little spinners now in the front of that bra, like shooting out sparks.
And on the panties, just sort of like, so as you move, just like when you're, 4th of July as a kid, and you take the sparklers and draw as you move, you're leaving a line.
Mm-hmm. I love those.
Yeah, that's what I got today for you.
I think that's delightful.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's what came to me.
Oh my gosh.
Good.
Yeah. So thinking about these last 2 years, like, what is something you're kind of most astounded by going through this experience?
Of having a podcast?
Yeah, the podcast or community, whatever aspect of it that seems to, grab you. Is there anything in particular that you're just like, can you believe it? Never would have thought 2 years ago.
Well, I on a personal side, my tech skills have really
Oh my God,
grown
amazing.
tremendously. Never would have thought in 2 years ago that we would be, doing live streaming with multiple cameras and stuff like that for our Time of the Month show. My wine skills have also increased.
I'm impressed. You've got that palette has
It has
grown
gr-
from panties to real serious. No,
to sparklers. Yes. No, right. And my dad will always be like, okay, here comes the wine snob now, because I'll have a whole, just like you do for our podcast, right? I have a whole story about the wine and the region when I'm sharing it with other people. So, not to come across as, a know-it-all, but it's more of an excitement that I know this story and I want to share it. I think I'm just blown away, Emily, that the people that we've met, the women and the men that we've talked to, and the learning their stories, listening and sitting with them while they're telling us their stories, hasn't given me. I already had
you were open,
an open and grand view of the world.
Yeah.
But it has opened my eyes even further to areas that I was not aware that I was lacking on understanding. That's just been such a gift, and we have presented these conversations and have had these conversations from a point of love and compassion. Nobody that we've had a conversation with have we done that in a sense of, oh, if we have her or him on our show, it'll move us to this other echelon.
Right. We've never had intentions of.
Right. We have if when we talk about madness in a little bit, he talks about people having dignity, and everybody is born with that dignity. And if we recognize the dignity in others, and you see that person as a person and as an end, not as a means to an end. And so it really hit me today listening to his podcast, and I was like, I think we've done that on our show. I think every person we've had has been with dignity. We've not had anybody that we felt in an artificial sense would move us someplace else.
No, not a lot. In fact, we've had conversations with people that we felt differently than their perspective in moments, and we've had a real broad range. Like, everybody that's here isn't 100% aligned with our own personal stories or personal experiences, or even out of the gate, people who will say yes to everything we have to say, and I agree so much with your your statement of, we've invited these conversations to approach them openly and honestly, and I too, like you, I feel I've really, really grown. Like, I feel like when I moved to St. Louis, I was on that search to grow. Like, I knew I needed to learn and listen more. And it's been a really great place to do that, because things are very volatile in this particular city. But it's not just the city, it's the world right now. You know, and it's all these things that are being put under pressure. And so I really feel so blessed by how my perspective has broadened by having people who have had very different lives than me come sit at our table and talk about, what it was like trying to find a daughter who was missing and they suspected was either a victim of sex trafficking or murdered. To talk about, women who were really taking on their own, sexual power and not being ashamed to be who they are and live how they want to. And I've found so much strength in these conversations. And that has been the thing that has, to me, been one of the most powerful and rewarding things about this journey.
And then just to follow into that, the generosity of every guest to tell us their stories, to open up and share. I can't remember who it was, but she said that she was like, I didn't expect to come here and tell you that story today, or I've never shared this with somebody before. And, and then she goes on to tell us, about, leaving home at 13. I think that's that generosity and authenticity and vulnerability of our guests and what they've given to us in that manner.
Don't you think that is so, it's just needed, right? It's always needed, period. But right now, I feel it is such a pivotal time.
I agree, but I think, but why? Why has it taken until now, or is it going to really be different? How have we as a society, and I'm talking generalities here, gotten so comfortable prior to our current situation in a functioning world that didn't have depth on the surface? Everything was nice, easy, fun, make me happy, keep me happy.
Do you think that that's a world thing, or do you think it's an America thing? Because honestly, I'm very thankful that we are in America, because we have had a lot of privileges here. But those privileges are not too, they haven't been around forever. We've talked a lot about the suffragist movement and, and civil rights and all of these things that are not actually all too, they're not too old in this country. So, and I think, if you look around the globe, there are a lot of countries right now that don't have the same kind of opportunities that we do here. So I'm curious about this concept of, when we're throwing the world in at it, is it the world that is starting to suffer by not acknowledging these privileges, or is it an America problem, or is it a first world issue?
Well, I would have to say, I definitely first world. I think definitely in the world of luxury, regardless of where you are, you have a different level of connections. Obviously, I can speak from experience there, obviously, but right. I think that in my experience, the United States of America has exported an idea of what an American life is. And, 2.5 kids, a house in the suburbs, white
dog,
picket fence,
cat.
a dog, cat, minivan, and truck. And we have...
And a sports car for those who are really killing it.
Yeah. Not to mention the debt that it takes to go into that. But, this American dream, they've exported this American dream. And we have fallen for that, too, those of us that live here. And we have, through the disruption, and I've said this before, if the one good thing comes out of the current administration leaders' time in the White House, is that our institutions, the cracks are showing, and that they need to be fixed. But we've fallen for that idea of the American dream, or the idea of American exceptionalism. That could never happen here because we're so great. We could never have put people in concentration camps because we're so great.
Oh my God.
But we do.
We do.
And we did, right?
Yeah.
In World War II, we had the Japanese internment camps. We have children
at
the border right now.
Yeah.
And we're not marching and stomping our feet and going down there and demanding anything different, which blows my mind every day.
Yeah.
We're not ashamed.
We're not.
That. Collectively.
There's individuals who are outraged by it, right?
Right.
That rage doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because what's going to solve the problem is empathy.
And yes, empathy, and knowing that we have to be better, and the way we are better is we work together, and we look at each other as human beings with dignity. Yeah, as opposed to a person who came over here, and isn't allowed to be here, and so we'll just take your child away from you.
Yeah.
And now they're gone. And they're just gone.
It's astounding to me when you think about, okay, so think 23andMe and all these programs that show you your genetic history. And all the commercials, right? All these people I'm so excited to learn. I always thought I was Irish, but guess what? I'm German. Or, all these stories of people discovering their past. And we're all so hungry to feel that connection to our roots. And it's so interesting because many of the families, when they moved here, felt compelled to disconnect from those roots so that they could integrate easier. And in a lot of times it was a legal thing. You couldn't speak anything but English, or, there was actual ramifications to not integrating, more cleanly. So it's just interesting to me that inside we long for that connection to our past. There's been all these measures that have prevented that up until now. And we are so quick to, when we finally learn about our roots, be really excited and embrace it. But we're quick to judge others who are new into this country. Yeah. We might be 1 or 2 or 3 generations deep.
I'm 2. No, or my dad's father's from Ireland, and he came over to Canada in 1923. So and then my dad was born in Canada. and was adopted.
So you're first generation.
He came to the States in 1948.
You're first generation on your dad's side.
Yeah, but on
right?
my mom's side, they came over on the Mayflower.
Yeah, so, that's something that to me is just really, it's so hypocritical when you think about, those who are, keep those borders tight. Well, would you be here if they were so tight?
No, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here.
Right.
But I think we we idealize the immigrants before, the European immigrants, right? We idealize that. We don't idealize the Latin American or the Hispanic immigrants. We do not idealize, people from Africa. Whether immigrants or those that were enslaved. We feel like the right immigrant is the white immigrant. That's been definitely the flavor of the current administration.
Do you think? I'm curious about that a little bit. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's just time too. Like, if 30 years from now, will it be the same? Because more of the the Latin American community will be,
demographically, it will not be the same as it is today.
Right.
The demographics are clear that there will be more of an equal versus majority white. And that is what's scary to
those who have the power.
Those who have the power,
right?
And that system has served them well. And
it's true.
They don't want that system to change, which we are at that crossroads where we need to demand a different system. And I think about how the countries, Europe, even in Latin America or South America, the number of times they've gone through upheaval and change in governments and things like that. Are we at that point
in our? I feel like we are, don't you?
In our history, we're 200 and something years old, 250 years old almost, or are we?
I don't know. I feel like things are really at a place that they are. I think it's eerie right now. Actually, we've got COVID, which is making people feel really pent up, and and that we've seen some kind of retaliation from that,
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this frustration of not having a voice by a large segment of our population. And so you combine these various factors of being pent up, not having the voice, and total disregard of what's right, by our leadership, and so I think we are in this moment that seems really like, I don't know. I think things are gonna go one way or another. I don't think they're gonna sit in the middle.
They can't.
Right.
They can't sit in the middle anymore. The fact that we have sat in the middle for so long is what has perpetuated the injustices, the lack of the voices of the marginalized, persons of color, LGBTQIA plus, women, because everything was going along fine here, right? And I was paying my bills a little bit, that all that kind of stuff was happening, and although we might have wanted a better society, we couldn't envision it, how we would get there, and we didn't know that our struggles were we have universal struggles, although our experiences with those struggles are unique.
Yeah.
But it's just, the Me Too movement, or the Me Too watershed. I don't want it. It's not a movement. It shouldn't end. I mean, if sexual assault should never be, or sexual harassment should never be, put under the table again. It should not be accepted ever again. And it was 30 years ago.
It was 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we as a society, and even in my life, right, driving along in that middle of the road, not knowing, wishing things could be easier, wishing that I, didn't have to pay out ask to, fight cancer 6 years ago, even with insurance. And knowing in other countries that they have different systems, and why don't we use those systems? Why don't we do those things? So I really feel, and I said this last week, we have some great young people in their 20s, 30s, teens, late teens that are coming up and can help push our country towards a more just nation. I mean, if the founding fathers, I notice I said fathers, were correct, and then there wouldn't be any amendments to the Constitution.
Right.
It's a living, breathing document, and so things change.
Yeah.
And we should change and evolve with it. But I feel that we have a chance, and well, you know what a chance seems like. If we don't take it, we'll miss it. No, I think that's the wrong word.
It's just a pivotal moment in time.
It's a pivotal time for us to keep talking, keep demanding, demand better of yourself, demand better of your neighbor, demand better of your mayor, demand better of your alderperson, demand better of your
start local, right?
Demand better of your governor, because it is, and I didn't realize we were going to turn into the news talk radio today, but it's for the people, of the people, by the people. It's not for the rich on the backs of it has turned out to be that way, but it wasn't written to be on the backs of the poor.
No, that was never the original intention. And, when you were talking about, going through cancer and having health insurance and all these things, it made me think of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And, this is something that Eleanor Roosevelt and the United Nations, back in, when was this? Drafted. And it was, one of what they saw around the world, one of the basic essential human rights is health care. And as you really look at that, it's like, there's 30 basic human rights. When you look at it, so many of those are not being honored in the United States today.
Right. Yeah.
Nor are they being fostered by the United States elsewhere. Of course they're not. So it's I don't think that most people, if you were to read that declaration, most people would go, people deserve to be healthy. People deserve education. People deserve,
the freedom of speech.
And to be able to peaceful protest.
Assemble without fear.
Right.
Yep.
But all of these things are really so many of them are being challenged right now. It's really fascinating.
Well, because the cracks in the system, right? And God forbid that those who have benefited from that system realize that the pie is immense, and they can share more of the pie, and they're still okay.
Right.
and I think about that idea about the system, and I've mentioned this to you before. What makes a woman, what why is it easy sometimes for a woman to sell out, betray other women? You know,
Fear. It's not easy. I think it's fear based. Who wants another person to fail? Like inherently, does somebody really want someone to fail?
Or, I mean, think about the the women who vote against their best interest, right? Or or who
I don't think they understand what those interests are. Can they? I mean, if they're voting against it, do they really understand?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my concern is that it might be two sides, right? They might not understand it, or they understand it but think that they're willing to compromise, or for their own benefit. It's whatever the system is serving them.
Yeah.
And
if
so
they're not thinking about
they're
all the other people.
they don't think it matters. They don't think that those lives matter. Those other women matter.
I'm trying to go back in time because, as we know, I had a different philosophy
Pre-meeting me.
pre St. Louis, I've really evolved, thankfully,
Yeah.
because I lived in a very protected little bubble, and so, I remember I think I've always been a person with empathy. But, I haven't had a life on the easy street either.
Right.
Right. So I think that was a hard thing for me to grasp when I was in this protected bubble of, well, this is former me realized,
Right. No,
but I'm
yeah.
like, well, I've worked hard. I've paid my bills. I think that because, like you said kind of earlier in this conversation, we come with our own understanding that's informed by our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of work to study the lives of others so that you can make decisions that are beyond yourself and make judgments beyond yourself.
Yeah.
And it's hard to even saying judgments, you haven't lived that person's life, so how do you know? But I think that I am thankful because my exposure has broadened so much so, but it's taken a lot of work. And boy, when you have life easy, why would you, there's something that has to happen to push you to want to challenge that. And I think that's a problem that we have with those that have the power right now.
Well, I think we have to maybe we look at it from a few different angles, and we talked about the suffragists,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them were women of wealth,
Yeah.
not necessarily of any power, but they had, they did
Wealth had power.
right, but they weren't necessarily working class, but they fought for the right to vote for women,
Mm-hmm.
all women. When I guess what bothers me is when I see a woman, a female politician, a female uh, pundit, a female radio, talk show, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
who actively promote policies that hurt other women.
Yeah, that is astonishing.
And that they do that sanctimoniously,
Yeah.
and as if they have the right to decide what should happen in another woman's life, because those
Yeah.
decisions that they're making are not affecting them and their bubble, right? And it might have been on the Madness podcast by Stephen Reisner, or another thing I read today was when the rich are making decisions for the poor.
Oh, right. Oh my God.
It isn't to the benefit of the poor.
Right.
It is always to the benefit of the rich.
Yeah, and there is this like really disgusting idea that poor people can't make good decisions for poor people. Like,
Right.
When you look at that philosophy through that scope,
Yeah.
like why wouldn't we have viewpoints from all races, all all economic backgrounds, all educational backgrounds, because that's what America is.
Yeah.
It's a melting pot of all of it. So why can't we have an infusion of ideas from all those parties? I think it's very wrong to assume that somebody who's always had the best schools and every pair of shoes they've ever needed to wear in their life given to them versus somebody who comes from a family where the mother worked 3 jobs and the father worked 3 jobs and they went to public schools, and those are very different viewpoints and realities.
Well, and I think it's because they don't actually want to hear from the people who are struggling. They don't want to hear.
Well, I think there's this idea that poor people are bad.
That is immoral. That they've made bad moral
Right.
decisions.
Right.
So
They're lazy or not
yeah.
working hard enough.
So we've made
Yeah.
the accumulation of wealth into a character trait.
Right.
And we
I'm
do
a
the-
good person because I have a lot of money.
And we do the same thing with
Right.
health and health care.
Yeah.
Well, you got cancer. Tough.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't have.
Maybe it's your life decisions.
Yeah, we got you there.
Yeah.
You did that to yourself.
Mhm.
I mean, I know that it touches 1 in 4 people, but hey,
Right.
I'll be the one that it doesn't touch because you know what? I'm a good person.
Right.
I'm okay, and that's what like COVID is showing.
Right.
COVID doesn't discriminate.
No.
It's if it gets you, hopefully you can have a mild case and survive it, and you don't end up perishing like 209,000 people have done so far.
I mean, we every couple of weeks, you and I are having a download. Like we know more people. Like I know people, many people, young people. I know a young person, 19.
Yeah.
Who has unfortunately not made it through this, and every week, friends of mine who have been careful,
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean, just in the last 7 days, when Trump was, tested positive,
yeah,
and he was taken off to the hospital,
right,
and and we're going to pay for that.
yeah,
We're paying for that. He's not going to get a bill for his
right,
COVID treatment.
right. So he gets the benefit of
Socialized medicine.
right, right,
Universal health care. So, we're going to pay for that. And, you think about all of the people who maybe didn't go to the doctor because they were afraid of the bill, were waiting for the results of their test, but they perished before they found out that the results, or the hospitals that, are full.
yeah,
And then we have the commander in chief being medevaced because he needs a little oxygen. There's 2 Americas, and it doesn't need to be that. And we've operated on 2 Americas for a while. I mean, this isn't just new because Trump is
there's a growing chasm for sure.
Yes,
it has been.
yes,
Yeah,
but there's so much out there you can educate yourself on and read and listen to, and so that you can make, even in addition to Cliterally Speaking the Podcast,
right.
that you can make even better decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
Listeners, I mean, I know I kind of want to talk about.
Yeah, we need to.
We want to talk about
I think so.
the Madness podcast.
Yeah, I think, it was like, do we want to take a little break and make sure we have full glasses?
Yeah,
and then,
and then
we should talk about that a little
madness
bit.
And
yeah.
get through the rest of it. Okay, let's take a real quick break.
Okay.
All right.
You got to put your muscle into it.
I keep looking for the James Baldwin quote about being black in America. That's what I was doing, and it's something like being a black person in America is having no history and no voice.
Oh man, that's
But that's quickly paraphrased. He of course wrote it so much better about being black in America. Quick break.
okay.
All right. Identity. How about that?
I love that. Oh my God. Ugh. I have to admit, like, part of me wonders if he actually really has it. Because, I mean, could it be a ploy to just be like gaining sympathy?
It could be, and it could also be like, look, and now we have remdesivir for you.
It's nothing.
Because
It's not a problem. I made it through.
Yeah, don't.
And make sure we have full glasses.
Yeah,
and then,
and then
and then we should talk about that a little
madness
bit.
and
Yeah.
get through the rest of it. Okay, let's take a real quick break.
Okay.
All right. Don't let it rule your life.
He did say that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm doing great.
We have great medicines here, but he's
Yeah.
sure on the.
Because the Trump administration has been on this from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We've been really taking care of business. Yeah. I'm ready when you are. And we're back. Hey.
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 I know.
Hey. I'm texting, but hey.
She caught me. There's a great quote by James Baldwin that I was trying to find that I wanted to use, and I'm going to paraphrase it terribly, but he says that to be black in America is to to be an African American is to have be an African without memory and be an American without a voice.
Wow.
And he said it way better than how I paraphrased it.
Of course.
But that's just really striking, you know?
Yeah.
You know, here we are talking about 23andMe and, you know,
Yeah.
our history and our ancestors. And I go back to here and there and I just think about, you know, how much documentation there isn't available to find the great great grandpa over in you know, in Africa.
It's true.
And what a tragedy that is.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you put together those family stories? And you know, and we ripped children from their mothers in the United States during the slavery times.
And we're doing it now.
And we're doing it right now, you know,
Yeah.
and we are perpetuating again somebody's story that they'll never know their heritage or their line, their mom, their dad, and that's a tragedy. And it's happening right here in in the United States, the great United States. And I think the way the United States has behaved in the last 4 years, the rest of the world right now looks upon us with pity.
Yeah.
And probably a little bit of a
Thank God that's not us.
Thank God that's not us. And well, it's nice to see the United States fall apart, you know, because we have had this idea that we're
perfect,
you know, the greatest, what do they say? The leader of the greatest nation, or, you know, we're the leader of the free world. I mean, such arrogance.
But is that that's our own verbiage? Like, that's not what the rest of the world, isn't looking at the United States going, oh, this is the leader of the free world.
Right.
That's our own propaganda.
That's our arrogance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had to, hopefully we've come down a notch. I don't know.
I don't think so. I think one of the things that I'm learning every year that goes by on my side, unfortunately, I feel that as a species, we're not as evolved as I would like to think we are.
Oh.
And in fact, it's far worse than I thought.
It's really depressing. It is so depressing when you
Yeah.
think about it. So, I was listening to Madness, the podcast by Steven Reisner today.
So
Which then,
good.
and before we get back to him, which then sent me down like another little path. And I was reading a lot about Mary Wollstonecraft, the mother of Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. But the mother, she was like the early feminist, and she wrote a book about where is it? It's about, she wrote a vindication on the rights of women.
Oh, yes.
Of women. Back
Yes.
in 1792.
Right.
1792.
I've read that. Yeah.
We're still
I know.
trying to get those same equality, the same education,
Yeah.
the same chances and opportunities for women today, 300 years later,
Mm-hmm.
310, almost 320 years later.
And yet, even though we've gotten certain rights, there are those actively pursuing, like they're, pulling those back. It's just astounding.
Right.
It's
And
taken how many years, right?
I mean, and she was writing back then about, women should have access to education. She was very angry at the I'm going to say the Constitution of the new French Republic after the French Revolution, because it said it was equal rights for all, but they were excluding women.
Because they weren't a part of all, right?
Right.
How do you define all? Oh, well, only white men.
Only French men, things like that.
Right.
And so she was really, ahead of her, apparently way ahead of her time, because we're still struggling for those types of equal access and equal opportunity. And it's almost like women we have carried such burdens, and I'm talking collectively across generations. Mm-hmm. And Mary Wollstonecraft had an affair with an American man that she had a daughter with first, before her second daughter, Mary Shelley. And the American man, no surprise, he made all kinds of promises, and he left.
Didn't deliver.
Yeah, they met in Paris, and
boy.
then he went, I think he went back to England, and he had to do some stuff, and he was going to come back for her. So she followed him to England, and he'd already taken up with somebody else. No surprise.
Right.
No surprise. And she was like, devastated.
And
by
she's
it.
a whore because she's had a child out of wedlock.
Exactly.
Right?
But she still raised that child, and then she still did some work for this American man, because she was hopeful that maybe, the story is just heartbreaking, and also
and common.
still common today, right? So you have, and that was, women didn't have children out of wedlock and keep them, right? And then she went to Norway and came back or whatever. Then she met Mr. Gibbons, had her second daughter, and died of a few days after childbirth, Mary Shelley. So, but when she was talking about,
that's so fascinating. That I didn't know that she died. That
childbirth.
Isn't that just helps you understand how maybe she came up with this idea of bringing a body back to life with Frankenstein.
Oh, I don't know. We'd have to probably. I bet you there's been literature students that are already
That's so interesting. Go ahead.
She was, and Mary Wollstonecraft was only 38 when she passed away, very young, definitely. And her dad was his father had a great company, had lots of money, but her father squandered the money, and so she got moved around a lot. And he was a drinker. He would beat her mother. She would lay outside her mother's door to try to prevent her father from beating her. And then she learned that whatever meager inheritance that was left was going to go to her brother, not her or her sister.
Right.
So all of these sharp distinctions between what the society felt was important versus what women could have. And so, whatever a man needed, right, you give it to the man. We continue fast forward to today. How many women are raising children by themselves because the
Right.
the the the
Broken
father
promise. Yeah.
has broken promises, hasn't shown up. How many women have to keep jobs and children, and and all of these struggles, and we to keep things going and keep things together, and to bring those children forward in life.
And the women are always judged if they're working too hard and they're not there for enough for their kids, or they're judged because they're not working hard enough, or they're judged because they don't have a father around, or they're judged because there's the women are constantly being.
And our society is not designed to help women.
Mm-hmm.
It's not designed. It hasn't been. So all of these equality measures and equity measures that women have been pushing for 320 years, we get like a drop here. Well, you can vote. We get a drop here, but the system is still designed to keep you down.
Right. Yeah. Oh, completely.
And so I think we can spend a whole 2, 3, 4, 5 podcast episodes on Mary Wollstonecraft.
Inequities of,
but I highly recommend, going down that road, doing the reading, listening to, there's lots of great things out there. She's pretty fascinating.
She's an amazing person.
And then it made me think about like rereading Pride and Prejudice, because she talked about the changes that needed to happen is women needed to change their manners. And not like, not using your hands, using forks and knives, but like changing your manners and not accepting the idea that a proper woman is a woman who is meek and dainty and fragile, and lives to needlepoint and sew and domestic, not falling
silent, not heard,
right. And that women had to recognize that in themselves and then change that. And I still think we struggle today. I said to you,
well, we've got generations upon generations of conditioning.
And how do we break that conditioning? And when I was listening to Gaslit Nation, and they were talking about Ivanka Trump and Amy Coney Barrett as being the perfect woman in a white male, in the patriarchy, the white male idea of what the perfect woman is.
Because she does what daddy says.
And she's pleasant to look at.
Right.
And she's not and she's a good breeder.
Yes. Oh my God.
I think Amy has 5 kids. Ivanka's got 3.
Yeah.
I think. And then they're not necessarily, they don't challenge the
authority,
the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And then that made me think, it's like, well, how do you and I fall into that idea of what is the perfect woman? Or do we succumb to the images in our media, in our Hollywood movies, in our books, on our social media of what is the perfect woman? Are we ascribing to that same idea because we don't think it could be anything else?
I think that's a really good question. I believe that throughout my childhood, my young adult life, I think absolutely I was ascribing to be the best that I could be upon the society speaking what I thought I had to be, right? Which is very conflicting as a young person, because you're starting to discover your own ideas and talents, and then you're told they're not valid, or they're not important, or, and so I definitely made decisions in my younger years to be who I thought I was supposed to be. And I think that that's very common. It wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I started realizing how terribly unhappy that made me, and started exercising my own voice, which cost me a lot.
Yeah.
But now, on the other side of it, 10 years later,
Yeah.
I honestly can't say that day to day I'm repressing my inner self like I was. Like, I literally, everything I did, I had to second question because I was repressing every part of myself. Now I feel, and maybe I think the podcast has definitely helped, but I definitely feel that I'm making decisions and feeling and saying things because I believe it's right and because that's how I feel and that's based on my experiences. And I'm trying more than ever to be as understanding, as open as possible, and realize I'm not always right. So I'm trying to like grow even when I'm like, that's not sitting comfortably with me. I'm trying to figure out why,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I think we're capable.
I think so, and
Yeah.
I think that there are industries designed around perpetuating that idealized
Yeah.
pursuit of what is the perfect woman.
Yeah.
Hollywood,
Being pretty.
cosmetics,
Yeah.
being pretty, being thin,
Weight loss.
Yeah. I mean, just think. And then if we could shed ourselves, break through that, break free from that, how liberating, and then how much, like, what are we suppressing as a gender because we're trying to be something that we're not. Like, what creativity, what innovation, what happiness, what joy is being suppressed because we're trying to pursue somebody else's idealized version of what you should be.
Well, that doesn't go beyond just gender. I mean, think about just socially embracing all of the stories of, we were talking earlier, immigrants, poor people, people from all different sects of life, and, embracing their stories and engaging in full conversation and understanding can only expand our own innovation and creativity on a greater level.
Yeah. Well, and if by embracing other stories, hearing other people's stories, sitting in the moment, listening, it makes you have to deal with your own, your own baggage, your own trauma, your own shit,
It's all good lessons.
And a lot of times people don't want to sit there and listen because they don't want to deal. And I think that the thing about the COVID and the Corona times is we kind of been forced to deal with some stuff, and hopefully we're going to continue to force and deal with it within our institutions in our government. But we keep promising to talk about this podcast, this other podcast,
it's
Madness.
So good. In fact, Michelle, I wish that I've been able to listen to the entire episode. I haven't yet. I've listened to the first 20 minutes of it, and I listened to the first 10 minutes of it 3 times. It's that impactful.
Yes.
It's so incredibly powerful and relevant. And it's not just an opinion. This is a podcast by somebody who is very educated, is a psychoanalyst,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And also very educated on the history side of things.
So the name of the podcast is called Madness by Steven Reisner. That's Reisner. You can get it on iTunes. And it's where capitalism and psychology collide. And I heard about his podcast off of Michael Moore's Rumble. Michael Moore had him on as a guest. And I then, I was just fascinated. And I believe he's a professor. So sometimes you just feel like you're in a college class. You're listening to his many, many great episodes. I think I listened to, he has about 10 or 11 out there.
He's pleasant to listen to.
Yes, very, very much so. And so he had, when COVID was coming, he went to France. And he stayed in France he exiled himself in France during that time. He'd actually purchased that place in France when Trump was elected because he thought he might need to have a place to get out of town if necessary. So he did he's very insightful, very you you will do your brain and your
And
eyes
your heart.
and your heart a tremendous service by listening to his podcast. But the one that he has out now, the most recent episode, I listened to it and I sent it to Emily. I was like, you need to listen to this. And it's called In Praise of Shame. And that's In Praise of Shame.
Yeah.
Dr. Stephen Reisner argues that if America is to be saved, if America is worth saving, Americans must reconnect with the emotion that psychoanalysts and biblical prophets believe is necessary for social change.
Yeah.
Shame.
Wasn't that like, let's just tie in the biblical prophets, because the conservatives, you know, are highly supported by very,
Yeah.
highly religious.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, they're using
organizations.
They're using the religion for suppression.
So to think about the fact that, like, when you start diving into some of the arguments he makes, you know, we've got such a strong bend of, you know, the church supporting Trump, but yet some very fundamental things are really at odds with one another.
Opposite ends. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, I loved how he started the episode out by really talking about suffering, you know, and how, you know, suffering, he's like, you know, when you really look at the word suffer and etymology and what it means to suffer, he's like, Americans don't suffer.
No, and I think
you know, suffering means
we're afraid to suffer.
Right. It means to endure, to bear, to tolerate, right? That is the real word of suffering.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fact that Americans, there's a lack of tolerance. And in fact, it just equates to rage on all sides.
Right.
All sides. Everybody's up in anger right now.
Well, I think he said that instead of suffering, Americans will go into debt. So that there isn't a suffering, right? You think about, okay, well, I really, really like that pair of shoes, but I'm not going to get paid until next week. But they might not be there. I don't know if I can really wait a week because I'll just put it on my credit card. I'll just go into debt for that. And that's a very small.
It's putting the head under the rug, is what it is. It's like, you know, I don't want to be uncomfortable.
I don't want to be uncomfortable.
Right.
And
I want to look like I'm very comfortable.
Well, yeah, but like it's the whole thing about I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable in my home, in my workplace, in my neighborhood, in my society. And the things that make me uncomfortable, I'm either going to ignore them, put my head on the rug, or I'm going to hate it. So like the folks out there doing, and the peaceful protests make some people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And they don't like the fact that the people are protesting because it makes them uncomfortable because they don't want to face up to anything.
They don't want to be challenged in their own ideas.
Right. And I think the fact that Americans, and there's always somebody who's willing to, sell you something or give you something, and there's a pill or that or that, so that you don't have to suffer. Emily, you shouldn't be suffering right now. Have a little more champagne.
Yeah.
Oh, Emily, you shouldn't be
Well, I tell you, there's a lot of people that we're using our champaign right now.
Oh, I know. I'm just giving an example. Like, hey, take this pill. You don't need to be suffering like that.
Yeah.
It's just stuff.
Right. But to endure, to bear, to tolerate gives us empathy, right? And helps us look at things through other lenses to make better decisions. And right now, the way that we're sitting, socially speaking, with our leadership, there's not tolerance. In fact, it's the exact opposite that's being flamed.
Yeah.
When the Proud Boys were called to stand back and stand by, that's saying something's coming, I'm going to need you.
Right. Yeah, we're not going to tolerate the results of the election.
Right. We're not going to believe it. We're not going to, And, I think that there's a total lack of, realizing that human rights are, I don't know, I just feel like the human rights issue has really been compromised through the years in an accelerating pace.
And as Dr. Reisner explained so eloquently in his podcast, we've been fighting for human rights and civil rights, especially since World War II and the UN, Human Rights Commission, and then civil rights in 1965, but then he said there's a shift in the 1980s when the neoliberals came in. It was the Reagan era, and then where people became commodities, and we became like, what's the cost of this? What's the cost of that? And we were employees. We were the human cost.
Suffering's an economic issue.
Suffering became an economic issue, and then that continued to shift forward to today with the evangelicals and their view of suffering as a moral issue.
Yeah.
So we have, and it goes back to what I said about dignity. We have looked at people as products, as things that can be replaced, instead of you're going to be the only Emily Lane that's ever here on this earth. I'm the only Michelle Doherty that does the Cliterally Speaking podcast that's on this earth. I'm unique, right? You're unique, but society would look at us as, well, what sort of produce? How can they produce? What can we have them do? We become a number and not a person. And then he talks about a great example of this was after 9/11 when, there was a fund set up so people wouldn't be suing people, and instead of just giving the money that was needed to the survivors, they quantified how much your family would get based upon, if you're who died, mom, dad, whatever, whoever it was that died, what their occupation was,
what their income was,
what value, how much money they might have made, what value was there. So somebody who's a stockbroker, their family got a much higher amount of money than somebody who was the janitor.
Oh, man.
But wouldn't both lives be priceless?
Yeah. Right.
But we have commodified human beings. Again, back to the example on the border.
We did that upon the start of our country, bringing human beings to this country, stealing them from our land, and making them work for us. Slavery is the foundation of which things...
Right. Exactly. But and it's continued, right? It's continued
just in different ways.
Exactly. Right. I mean, it's not physical, tangible chains.
Yeah.
But there's economic change. There's social chains. So I was blown away listening to this podcast episode, because it just, lots of things were clear, and it just, I thought to myself, absolutely, I have to look at people, whoever they are, not as the value that person can bring to me, but just the value that person exists.
Right.
And then when you start to recognize the humanity in other people, you can't stay quiet and let things happen. Oh, well, it's really too bad about those kids on the border, but maybe they shouldn't have come over here.
Right. Like those kids had any choice,
Oh, well, too bad about the Secret Service guys stuck in the car with Trump. They knew what they were signing up for.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I know. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it just continues on, and he weaves through the podcast his own personal story with his family, and that both his parents are survivors of the Holocaust.
Yeah, the Madness podcast. Yeah,
the Madness
it
podcast.
is. He sets it up that way. You understand that he is an immigrant who came from a very a hardship story, layers of hardship.
Yeah,
and
well, he was born in the United States. Both his parents came over after the war. But we just we look at we have to be ashamed of how our government tear gassed peaceful
my God,
protesters
yeah.
outside the White House so he could walk across the street and
Hold a Bible.
upside down and backwards.
Yeah.
We have to be ashamed that in Portland, Oregon, the militia that came through and the federal occupied, the occupying force and beating moms in their yellow shirts. We have to be ashamed of this type of behavior, and we have to be angry about it. You know?
I think that's the thing he was talking about that I really sat with me was, all of this destruction, social media, flipping through pictures, videos, distractions, movies, Netflix, the shoes you were talking about wanting to buy, the wine, all of that distraction is kind of intent to help us from feeling that pain, the pain of shame. And so, there's some value in that. Like, I remember on our Time of the Month episode, you're like, they needed a mother in that debate. Boys, go to your corner,
Don't make me stop this. Don't make me stop this debate now.
Right.
I'm gonna put you in timeout, Donald.
Exactly.
No, you just don't. Oh, nope. Don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And not wanting to feel that embarrassment, that shame of knowing they did something wrong. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
he did it. He did it too.
Right. But I think that's the value in shame. Now, I think that sometimes shame goes too far. Like,
right. I mean,
but having a leader in place that feels no shame, I think, is a real conflict for us because
it's been evident that way for the last 3.5 years.
Right.
Nearly 4. I mean, he's had no shame the whole time.
Yeah.
I listened to Mary Trump's book about her uncle, and he has had no shame his whole growing up. So shame is an emotion that he is not familiar with.
Right.
But there are people around him that are familiar with shame.
Yeah.
There are senators that are familiar with shame who have ignored it and have allowed this to go on.
Do you think it's one of those things that once you start letting it go, you become calloused and you're
I don't know, maybe we should have Blunt or Holly on and ask them that question. Hey, you know
How
what?
do you do it?
You feel like don't have any shame anymore.
Once you went down that slippery slope, are you no longer?
Does it not bother you anymore?
Do you not have night sweats?
Do you not get
How is your drinking problem?
Yeah. How's your stomach? Do you have ulcers? I mean, do you get like a pit whenever you have to face somebody who is a constituent that
Can you look people in the eye?
Yeah. Can you look anybody but that camera in the eye? Yeah, I guess we'll try to get them on. I'm sure they're gonna answer
running for it right now, right?
Answer our request right away. Yeah, we'll get the governor on.
Yeah.
I just think that shame is an important emotion as a society.
Not wanting to do bad or harm to others.
Because we have to recognize the humanity in other people. And I know that you had noted this as well. And Dr. Reisner says that rage can, and we're full of rage right now. Rage,
all facets,
can destroy things, but
it can't restore.
It cannot restore.
Yeah. Just where the empathy comes in.
Solutions.
Creativity, understanding, conversations,
art, songs. That's where the healing can begin. But we have to recognize that we're never going to go back to how it was in the before times.
Yeah.
And that before time can even be like before 2016. It's never going to go back to that.
No.
And if we are hoping that this magic election in less than 30 days will save everything for us, we can't be Pollyanna about that.
No.
And we have to demand better of everyone, and we have to
of ourselves,
right? change comes from within. And if you no longer accept things, and I no longer accept things that way, and I'm talking about on the empathy side. I definitely am not talking about, well, I got 1,200 guns in my backyard,
Right.
and I'm no longer.
I'm all set for revolution.
I'm all. I don't like how their protests are going, and
Right.
I do not advocate for that kind of violence at all. But I think that if we recognize that we are all born, we are all here on this earth for a certain amount of time, and we can.
And don't we all want to leave it a better place?
Well, I think that's a great idea, that we all want to leave it a better place. I think we can leave it. We can leave this world a better place for some.
Yeah.
We can work as hard as we can right now
Yeah.
I mean, we just have to do better. And I want to say thank you to all of our listeners for letting us come into your cars, into your kitchens,
into your thoughts,
on your walks, maybe when you're at the gym and you're listening to us. I thank you for choosing to listen to us and let us go on all these long philosophical discussions.
And my goodness, we love it when we hear from you. Like, we love hearing your thoughts. So many times when we're talking with our friends from the Cliterally, they often say they're talking back with us, in the car or, wherever they're listening.
They're on the treadmill and they shout out at the Y.
Yeah.
People look at them funny, but it's just a podcast.
So, please, by all means, share them with us. We love it. And so you can email, you can, instant message us on all of our social medias, however you want to get in touch with us. We're very easy to be found. And please keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Well, Emily, here's to...
Oh my gosh, 2 years.
2 years and to many, many more.
Yes.
Happy anniversary.